Hey guys, welcome to the 18th episode in our multiplayer tutorial, and we'll be adding the save and load into a multiplayer game now. So, the editor D for enter details frame, we'll just where there's load map, just take these two things here, these three things. Take the scroll pane and the clear button, copy that and paste it over here. Okay, just cancel it. I'm just going to show this button in the library. It's buttons, and multiplayer game also has that in their library. So we'll just call this new buttons. And now just copy these two things, copy and paste. Cancel it again. It's the scroll pane, I think. And we already use a scroll pane. So just paste it here, put duplicate items into a folder, and you may need to resize this, or we can just leave it as is. And carry this menu button across. Go into the library, and there's probably going to have a scroll pane somewhere. Oh well. We have this loaded map here. Go into the actions in editor save, into the actions where there's stop and restrict and all these values, and just copy all the actions from here except the stop below. So this should load. Well, it won't load it yet because we need to carry over the movie clip to list. So go into the library of our template, create new folder and call it anything you like. I call it infinite single thing, and we just carry everything into this folder. Now copy this folder, go into our game and paste it inside here. So when we go to the editor, it will load up no maps are created. And go to new map, of course we'll go over here, since that has a function to go to root.editor save, which is this. Now that we have that, we'll need to work on saving maps. So below all this code, including exit editor, you just copy all the code from this file over here on the stop. So just copy everything, and we just put a comment here before we paste it so that we know where our border is. And paste. So this creates the MGT list. Take this out and put this above everything. If loading map is equal to true, take that out, put that. If we just put this here, we'll see that it's also down here as well. So just change this from load map to loading map. So if it's not loading map, then object depth is equal to 10, and these variables go accordingly. Else, if it is loading map, then call the function load map, and loading map is equal to false. Global loading map is equal to false. So it's kind of round-sided, but we can delete this loading map code up there. Check time doesn't need to move that. Save the map. So checks the time and saves the list. After we save the list, it can call to add to a new line. And there's the load map function and the save button, quit button. Take out the quit button since there's no quit here, and we'll need to create a save button. So since this is called the follow, go inside here, duplicate this menu button, and give it the instance name of save button. And then in scene 1 in the actions, we say root dot follow dot save button dot unrelease, and instead of saying my text, we want to check if this map here, if this map size is not default, and default will be 26 by 26. Or we can just save it as is. So when we press the button, global.viewName. Oh, just I remember I said to take out this because the name is the name of the map, which is already defined. And now scroll back up. Object depth will be 10 up here. So object depth, it will save the object depth and reload it. It will save the map name as well, and the map will save by global.viewName. This instance name called the map, change that to all map, and in the code in save map, we want to save the map size. So now we'll try saving the map size, and then after we'll try saving all the objects in the map. We have finished carrying over everything in this save load template. All we need to do, well, we don't really need to change around anything here because all we had that name was as a save map button. So when we save the game, we want a variable for, instead of text, we don't need text because we don't have text. So delete that in load map as well. And before flush, just just put flush below so that you won't get mixed up. Just remember to put this code before flush. So you say mgt dot data dot map width, or whatever you like to name it as, is equal to root dot or map, or you can leave it as the map. So root dot the map dot underscore width. So go back to this map and give it the instance name of the map. And underneath that, mgt dot data dot map height is equal to root the map dot underscore height. So that just saves map width and map height, and we also want to save the x and y. So mgt dot data dot map x is equal to root dot the map dot underscore x. The same thing for the y. Map y will be equal to its y position. So we can just copy these things here, these 4 lines here with height x and y, go down to load map and paste it under here. What we can do is carry this whole load map up here so that it will be easy to access it. So right click, cut, go up right under the save map, right click, paste. Now in the load map, where these things we want to actually load it instead, so take that out from here. I will say root dot the map dot width equal to mgt dot map width. Same thing with the height x and y. So the map's x position will in the load will be whatever we saved it as, and the same for the y. So just remove these things here. So that's how it will load. And we also we want to test this, but before we test this, scroll up to load and map, and also in the else, after we've loaded the map, then set the camera x and y's as well, so it will go back to the center of the map and loaded map will be false. Let's try this. So play, go to the editor, no maps created. New map, we will need to change up some code here, because if we go over here in the create map, it checks if root.map name is not equal to data map. So copy all these lines here inside this if function, go into infinite save thing, lists, and glist into the actions of this. Straight down to when we create the button that on release, instead of going to editor one time, we'll say if root.mapName.text is not blank and the width is not blank and the height is not blank, then it will set the global variables and say root dot go to and stop editors. Also, copy these three things here: global, not height, width, and name. Go back to scene 1 in the editor scene, and where we load the map, we call load map function. We want to save it. So under here, we just, after we set the width, height, x and y coordinates for the map, we say global dot the name. Well, that's all already defined up here, so remove that. Global dot the width will be equal to map width, and global dot the height will be equal to map height. Now, if we try to export it and press new map, it won't go to the new map. Clear will bring up, I show you what to clear, yes. So let's name the map. New map still won't work. Width and height. So our width is 300, or height is 100. So let's create the map. And well, these objects we can't add it yet, so let's just save. It goes back to editor scene. Oh, that's because in the save we forgot to take out this code. So in the save button, delete all this code, and now let's check it again. Let's name our map first. Map, just clear that. Width 250 this time, and the height will be 50. So when we create it, it will be this rectangle. And let's save, and now go back to menu, editor, and it is up here. Let's create another map called Bob. The width will be 50 and the height will be 400, or whatever size you like it to be. So create map, save, menu, editor, and Bob is there. So let's load first map, so you can see it loaded up the size of the map. Let's go back into the editor and load Bob, and Bob is like that. No matter if we move up here, so in case we lost where Bob was, all we can do is go back to the menu, load it, and it will go back to Bob. But let's also create something to center Bob. So in the actions for the camera itself, in order to access the camera, which is underneath this follow, just select the entire thing, which will select both the camera and follow. Press shift and click on the follow, which will deselect it. So if we have two boxes that are grouped here, and I want to access to this one, but he is blocking, just cover the two of them, press shift and click on him, which will deselect him, so only this one box will be selected. Or we can just simply carry up the follower, so we can click on our camera, but we'll have to move down the follower when we are finished. Or just leave it up as it is, because it should snap to the correct positions when we load the map after that. So it does snap to the correct positions. So in our camera, we want to set the key dot down left, then move around. Some people might want to use W, A, S, and D. So if key down left, or key that is down, and this key will be A, which is 65. Then left, else key down right, or key that is down D, which is 68. For up, it will be 87, which is W, and down the key will be 83, which is S. And under that we say if key that is down and R, which R should be, let's see, 65, 82. So if R is down, then we want to reset the camera. So we'll say X is equal to root dot the map dot X, and Y is equal to root dot the map dot Y. So in the editor, when we load this here and we stray too far, I press R, it will go back to the center. It seems as if the map is coming to the center, but actually we are going to the center. So if we add objects and press R, we go back to the center. But of course, those things won't actually save since we do not include saving for this. Now that we have map saving, let's try to get objects to save. So let's look for our object loop. After we release it, we want to swap depths with our new depth. When we load everything, each of them have their own depth values and their object names. We want to save the object values and the object names, and the name for them, I think, is okay. Let's just pin this here. So if we pin this active script, no matter what frame we are on, that script will be there. Unless you click on this object here, it will go there, but he is unpinned, so if we pin him, he will pop up in another tab, or we can select him and press close pin script to unpin him. So we've just pinned the script for what was inside this editor scene, and let's go into the library, into map resources. No, map types is that I'm looking for something. Into objects, and in each of these objects in the button, the code for it, we have to of course press this button. With that attach movie bush, bush new name will be bush and object depth. So we'll have to save each object as their names. So the name will be bush, but instead of just leaving it as bush, it should be bush.object depth. So after that attach movie, it will attach bush. His new name will be bush plus root dot object depth, which will be the same as his depth value, and then it will set his coordinates. So just copy this plus root dot object depth and go in each of these different buttons and paste it there, right between this comma and this. And since we have multiple objects, it will be good to keep a list of all the objects we have. So I'll just write a list right here. Inside code, we just write a list in bracket in comments. So open out a multiple comments, press slash and star, which is shift and 8. Just close it off below here one time. And we'll add object names. So the first object is bush, then rock, tree, barrel, hay, stop sign, there are no spaces or capital letters. So a stop sign, classroom, booth, house, and lecture. Now that we have this list, we can go to saving it. So when we save the objects, and save the map, under where we set the x and y's, we'll create a for loop which will be based on what the object depth is. So for, let's call this let's use an integer that would suit. So since we're talking about object depth, we'll say for depth is equal to 10, since object depth started at 10. Depth is less than or equal to the object depth. Depth plus plus. Or we can just say I. But it's the number for the object's depth. And then while this increases, we want to save the objects. So we say, since we are looping through all these items, we want to check which item exists. So we need to go back up to this list up here. Let's just have this below, and we'll use it. So we'll say if root bush plus I. So if, since we named the object bush plus root dot object depth, which object depth will start off at 10, so that object name will be bush 10. So it'll be bush 11, bush 12, hay 13, classroom 14, stop sign 15, classroom 16, according to whatever the name was. We will check if root dot bush and I, whatever I value is. So if this is not equal to undefined, if it exists, and all these objects will only have one name each. Then we'll say something like mgt dot data and the object name for this specific number. So object name plus I will be equal to bush. Put it in quotes. So if this does exist, then make the object name of the save file bush, and then we also want to save variables for the x and y. So mgt.data.object x for this particular object plus I will be equal to root bush plus I dot underscore x, and the same for the y. Object y will be that as well. So we also, so that's what we'll do. If bush is defined, then save it as whatever bush was. Else, if so, else if rock is equal to undefined, then the name of it will be, object name will be rock, the x will be rock.x, and y will be rock.y. So all we need to do is copy this tree, just paste it tree, barrel, and we just do it accordingly for all the different all these different objects. So I'm just going to do that and then come back. So now I have all these things loaded here, but what you'd realize, if we have lots of objects, this list would get pretty long. So while doing this, I've just thought of a way that we can avoid that, and we can just do it in about 3 lines. So go back into objects, this movie clip, and in each of these objects, when you attach the movie, so after we attach it, and when we set the x and y and the unenter frame, right before the unenter frame, just put a comma, and we'll set a name. So we'll say object name colon bush. Don't forget the string. So string, open quote, bush, close quote. So of course we'll need to set this for all the objects. So this one will be bush. This will be rock. This one will be tree, and just fill it in for the others. Just remember, while giving them the names, don't use any capital letters. Make the name, whatever the name is, the exact same as what we've added it to our game as. So this is a booth, we'll name it booth. So up here for the stop sign, its name will also be stop sign without any spaces or capital letters. And then the house, and lecture. So now that we have everything with its own name, we'll be using these names for the objects. So back to scene here. instead of having all this, let's just leave that there for now. We'll just say um, mgt dot data object name plus I will be equal to root dot. Oh, I forgot one more thing. In the objects again, we need to set all these things. Instead of making the name bush, we'll just make the name something like object. So its name will be object that we define it as, but it will have a variable called name that will be whatever its name is. We'll use this as reference for adding new objects. And since we'll access all of them as name, we can easily find all the data for saving it. And when we load it, of course, we'll have to set it back to name as well. So let's just see if we can get all these things here. This is actually something I'm trying on the spot. So we'll set everything as object, and back to the scene. We'll say green spot. mgt.object name plus I will be root and object, since all of their names will be object. It will call on whatever his name was, whatever object his name was, and it will say dot object name. So his name is object, but he has a variable called object name, which is his real name, which may be bush. So it will set it to bush. And then we just set object x to whatever this object's x value is, and y to whatever this value's y value is. This object's y value is. So all we need to do is set his name, since all of them will be object. Just find out whatever his name is and his x and y. So instead of using all these multiple lines plus more for all the different objects, we can just use these 3 lines and lots of different complicated stuff. So delete all this bush is equal to undefined. So in this for loop, just set the object name object name x and y. So let's move this, and then after that just flush as normal. So now we have it saved, we need to load it. So just copy this for loop and go into load map on the reset map y, paste it here. And since we want to, after we load it, we'll have to attach different movie clips. Let's just copy one of these attachment clips. Group that attach movie. So select this whole line, double click it 3 times, or you can just drag to select the entire line. Copy that, and back to scene in load map. Let's just place it on top here. So for this for loop, I will be equal to 10. I is less than object depth, since we defined it above here already. But if object depth was set below this function, then object depth might be undefined. So we'll have to say mgt data.object depth. But since object depth is above, it's already defined, it already has a value. So we can just make the for loop object depth. And now when we attach the movie, for object depth, we want to attach movies, and according to whatever I value is, we'll attach the movie based on the object name. So since we saved this object plus his object name, which was Bush, so he is Bush. And this save file will be Bush, so just copy this here. So we're gonna attach movie and attach this, which should be Bush or whatever it is, or new name that we name it. Its ID name is Bush, or new name will stay as object since we want to be able to save it again and call it as an object. And instead of object plus root dot object depth, since object depth is like object depth maybe 15 if you've added 5 objects. So his name will be Bush 15, then the other one will be like K 15, and everything will be 15. So change this to I, whatever the I value is. The depth will be something we have to define as depth, since we want it. We also want to save its depth values so that it has its different depths and it will be loaded upon its different depth. So back up into save map. After we save the x and y, just make a value variable called depth, and that will be the object that I think is in the object loop. It's new depth. So the depth will be equal to the object dot new depth, and since we save the depth, we need to load it up. So since we have it as object depth, in its depth value, depth, instead of root dot object depth, it will be whatever the depth is, since we because that's what we saved it as. And then in the where we use the init object to define all the variables, the x value would be whatever we saved as whatever variable we call object x. Y will be the saved value for object y, and the object name will be this object name here. So we also need to give it a variable called object name since we are attaching new movie clips. And on enter frame will be object loop again, object loop. And remove this from here. So this is how we'll attach it. By the way, the reason why I gave it the save file variable object name I is because they'll have many different objects. So the save variables, it's actually mgt. It will be saved as mgt.data.object name, and I starts off at 10, so it will be object name 10 is equal to whatever that name was, then object t.data.object name 11, object name 12. So that's what it starts as object name plus whatever I is, and I might be a very big number, and since we don't want to limit the user only to add 10 objects and have 10 save files, we can use this object name value here plus I. So just make sure the plus and the I is out of the strings, or the string will, or the name of it, if it's plus I inside here, then the name of it will be mgt.data.object name, no, object x space plus I, and that's not what we want. So don't make that mistake. This is how the objects will load after it has been saved. I doubt it will have any errors, but we also need to clear objects. So you can just copy this, just copy the for loop, and in clear objects, when we clear the objects, just say or I is equal to 10, I is less than object depth, I plus plus. The reason why I've set I as 10 in all the for loops is because object depth starts off at 10, since we can use 0 to 9 as different things. Load map here, I think we already have load map, so we shouldn't have two functions with the same name, or it may check the call the wrong function. So delete that load map from there. And when we clear the objects, just say root, and since we name all of them object plus I dot remove movie clip, because if we don't have this function here and we add objects to our game, we add a few objects to the game, then when we go back to the menu, those objects will still be there and still have their functions no matter where we are. So if we create another map, they also appear there. So if we put this clear objects function, and we have the objects, when we go to menu, it removes the objects, so that if we go in again, we can add new objects. So now let's test to see if this save and load works. So go to editor, let's name it test. Width will be, let's give it 500 by 400, which is the actual size of our game right now. So create map. No, my bad. Test. It's actually 550 by 400. So create map. That's our map here. And we can press R to reset to go back to the middle of the map. And let's just make a decent looking map. So I'll add the house here and one stop sign warning the users. And I'll just put a booth. Lectern. The reason why I've made it to use WASD, because if we press up and down to move around, you can see the scroll pane actually moves down as well. And if we scroll, well, when we scroll on the scroll pane itself, if we scroll on nothing whatsoever, it will scroll, but if we hover a button and scroll, it will scroll until we lose focus of the button. So what I usually do is put a slight background under, so that we can scroll through the entire thing without any problems. So we have, let's count the objects. We have one house, a stop sign, a booth, and a lectern. So let's save this. Let's go back to menu, editor. So we have it here, and if we play, it loads it up. Our house, stop sign, booth, and lectern. So if we go back in Bob, this is how Bob looks. This is how the first map looks, and this is how our test looks. So we can make other things, add whatever objects you want, just make sure not to add it outside of the map. Don't worry if it sticks out of the map. Once the coordinate value, which is this crosshair thing, once that's not outside the map, then it's fine. So let's just add this outside the map here. It may still load up, but deleting it may not work. So let's press it. Menu, editor. Let's go back and test. This is how our test looks. And This is how our new map looks. So since we've added it out here, it messed up everything else. So you know why I want you not to add it outside the map. So let's just delete that. Or we could have overwritten it. So create map. Even if you add an object out here and then drag it in, it will still mess up the map. So just make sure to always add objects in the map. That looks like a problem for saving actually. Well, there goes a problem. But let's just ignore that for now and we'll do one more thing, which is deleting the objects. So go into this save, actually just go into the save, create a box, small box, and this will be, you can make it look fancy or whatever, but we'll use this to delete. So convert it to a symbol, name it object del for object deleter, and give it the instance name of del for deleter. You may want to put this in a corner where it can't easily be triggered. And then in the code, in the object loop, after we release the object, we want the object to check if it is touching this deleter. If it is touching the deleter, then it will delete. So after we release it, after the stop drag and it gets its new depth, well, before it gets its new depth value, we'll check if root dot follow dot del dot hit test this is equal to true. So if it is touching, then this dot remove movie clip, else then this dot new depth and swap depths. And then this function will only call while it's hit testing if we release the object. If we do not release the object, we drag it somewhere away or we move the editor, it won't. So let's we have the barrel, and if we drag it here, it's not moving. If we move this up here, it won't delete. But if we drag it down here and release, it's gone. So that's how we can delete individual objects. Yes. And that's how that works. This episode is getting too well. This is very long. So I might split this into part A and part B, part C, but let's try and fix this last bug, which messes up all our different save files. So I'll pause it, find the problem, and I'll come back. One thing though, we have two screw pins inside here. uh, this screw pin is from over here. So click on the screw pin, properties, um, but we can't actually swap it, so just drag a new screw pin here. In properties, give it the instance name list box, and then make it the same width and height as this box. So 204, 302. The x value is 322, and the y value is 345. So delete this box, put in the y value here. Then go back into the library and delete this scroll pin, and also this duplicate items folder, delete it. And I have found the bug, the error. So first thing we need to do, since new depth swaps with the y position, say new depth was 12, and this swaps depth, so it actually swaps variables. So if if the object's depth was 3, this will swap depth with 12, so the new depth will become 3 and this depth will become 12. So we don't want to actually change the value of the new depth, so we create a value after the new depth. So new depth is equal to y, then we say this dot real depth, or this will actually be the old depth, and then we say this dot new depth is equal to this dot old depth. So old depth will be for the person, the object depth will be 3, but the old depth will be 4. So then the new depth will be 4, since it was the old depth, and this will swap depths, making this depth 4 and the new depth 3. But then the old depth will replace it back to 4. So instead of saving the new depth, we save the old depth. So whatever you have, which is equal to this dot y, in the save map, object depth will be equal to that old depth. And then there's one more thing we need to do, is change this from object depth, since in functions they have their variables. So copy object depth and press Ctrl and F, or I think this icon here to find, so it will find object depth and replace it with underscore root dot object depth. Replace all, and it replace everything to root dot object depth. But if we go down into the save, it also changed object mgt data object depth to root. So take out this, because that will make your program unresponsive, and take out the root in the one in the load map as well. Now that we have this, let's make our first test. So test 300, 300, and let's add 3 trees. Don't forget that you need to move it. So save, menu, let's add a final test and add 3 bushes, or 4, 6. Save that, go back to menu, and now if we test, click the load map to test it, it will load up the 3 trees. We can move this one below here and save it, and if we go back in it, it will load up, except for that tree that's not there. And if we click the final, it should have everything. So that's it for this tutorial. It seems to still have a few bugs, but that's nothing that we can really do about right now. So in the next tutorial we'll fix that off, or whenever we can. And that's it. So hope that this helped you with something. This is how we implement it, and I will see you guys again in the 19th tutorial, which may be the last. Bye.